You're at the bottom of the barrel and worthless. Today, you're fired. Using a novice who attended a reputable university is preferable to you." Mr. Sawyer had an arrogant smile. After hearing it, I was unable to contain my feelings any longer. Comprehensive. "I'm grateful for everything you've done so far." I said my goodbyes and walked out of the office. This was the pivotal moment that resulted in Mr. Sawyer's demise and my move towards starting over. I am Brian. I'm a 40-something regular office worker. I joined a local business and worked as a sales representative for a maker of precision equipment parts after receiving my degree from a nearby university. I put in a lot of work since I was a novice, and as a result, my performance is at the highest level. Everything in my life, job and family, is going well. My gracious wife is encouraging me to work hard. She helped me advance to manager status before any of my contemporaries. My supervisor, Mr. Foster, was the one who brought me up in this manner. However, Mr. Foster is already in his 60s, and I went to bid him my final farewell after learning that he would be retiring this year. I'm really appreciative of everything. Mr. Foster, it will be lonely without you. Brian, you'll be in charge of sales going forward. Try your hardest. I'm cheering you on. Yes, I will do my best. Mr. Foster gave me a shoulder pat and gave me a seemingly encouraging smile. Brian, a new manager is on the way. I'm confident you'll succeed. Your subordinates have a great deal of faith in you. Mr. Foster, I'll try to live up to your expectations. Kindly ease up going forward. Thank you. Seeing Mr. Foster, who served as a father figure to many at work, depart from the organization was quite upsetting. However, I swore deep down to manage my staff the way Mr. Foster managed his. The next week brought the arrival of the new management. Since he was from the headquarters, he was unfamiliar with this area. However, we were anticipating a wonderful individual because he was in the elite league and had graduated from a prominent university. It's good to meet you, Mr. Sawyer. Here as a manager, I'm Brian. I'm excited to collaborate with you. Which university did you graduate from, Brian? I graduated from Towson University here. When Mr. Sawyer heard my response, he grinned. I've never heard of it. You're claiming to be a graduate of some obscure subpar university. I guess you should do your hardest. Mr. Sawyer's patronizing demeanor internally infuriated me, but since I enjoy my work, I chose not to dwell on it too much. The advent of a manager with significant corporate work experience worried me, but as long as I carried on with my regular tasks, I assumed everything would be all right. But my expectations were shortly dashed. Mr. Sawyer, who was unfamiliar with this area, started calling our current client connections cozy relationships and radically changed our dealings with them. Furthermore, adhering to this is how we did it at the headquarters. He gave us absurd assignments based on his own notions. Mr. Sawyer, the previous method was much easier for that task. Hey, don't be so naughty. Since I am the department head, please don't oppose me. I didn't mean to disagree with you. I believe I was offering wise counsel, but it appears Mr. Sawyer was merely enraged. Mr. Sawyer gave me a shrewd look. Are you trying to deceive me because I'm not familiar with this region? I wasn't thinking that at all, but Mr. Sawyer, your method is inefficient. How could you use that tone when speaking to your superior? This explains why individuals from subpar universities. Observing our conversation, my coworkers became alarmed. Mr. Sawyer was always this manner, not only with me, but also with the other staff members. Mr. Sawyer would often respond to our opinions by saying, "This is an order from the manager. Don't be a subordinate and oppose me." The environment within the company became toxic as a result of Mr. Sawyer's inability to listen to anyone. When my subordinates and I went out for drinks one day, they said to me, "Brian, isn't Mr. Sawyer getting out of hand? He doesn't pay attention to our thoughts about work and is altering our practices on his own." Yes, working has been a little challenging. Our procedures are unquestionably simpler and more effective. and the needless overtime is becoming intolerable. Sighing, all I could do was listen to my subordinate's grievances. I've mentioned it a few times myself, but he doesn't listen at all. That's the main idea. Brian, Mr. Sawyer treats you quite harshly. He always brings up prior educational experiences. If someone works with you for a while, they can see that you're competent at what you do. All I could do was try to encourage them, and I patted my subordinate on the shoulder. Well, maybe Mr. Sawyer will understand in time. Let's keep up the good work until then. Yes, I like this job, but recently I've started dreading coming to the office. Well, let's keep the sales going among us. Though I said this to my subordinates, the atmosphere in the sales department had indeed been bad recently. I wanted to do something about it, but I couldn't go against Mr. Sawyer, and he probably wouldn't listen to me anyway. Honestly, I was also feeling stressed by Mr. Sawyer's attitude. I was working hard, but Mr. Sawyer judged me solely on my academic background, leaving me wondering what to do. A few months passed in this manner when one day, I inadvertently stepped in as I saw Mr. Sawyer berating a subcontractor more harshly than usual. Mr. Sawyer, that might be a bit too harsh, don't you think? What? What is this? Third-rate university, incompetent babbling about university backgrounds, are irrelevant now. The subcontractor is an important partner to our company. It's troubling if they are treated too harshly. Shut up. What right does someone from the bottom like you have to act so high and mighty? Mr. Sawyer glared at me hatefully and sneered unpleasantly. That's right. We don't need someone like you. An incompetent bottom dweller like you is fired. It's better to use a new hire who graduated from a prestigious university. I thought I had gotten used to Mr. Sawyer's nonsensical remarks, but his words this time made no sense to me. What do you mean? Haven't you heard, incompetent? There's a new person joining the sales department tomorrow. He's an elite, graduated from a prestigious university. Is that so? It's clear that someone from a prestigious university is more competent. I've decided to make the newcomer the manager instead of you, starting tomorrow. I was utterly shocked by Mr. Sawyer's statement. I looked at Mr. Sawyer doubtfully, wondering if he was serious, but he was grinning smugly. It would be tough for the newcomer to suddenly become a manager. I've decided I'll speak to the HR department. As the department head, by tomorrow, you'll probably be fired. It'll be refreshing to be rid of an incompetent bottom-dweller employee. I couldn't take it anymore after being told that. Understood. Thank you for everything up until now. After saying my goodbyes, I left the workplace. A few subordinates chased after me, trying to hold me back, but I only responded with, "I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help. I leave the rest to you," and then I completely left the company. My subordinates might have thought of me as cold for leaving so abruptly, but I decided that nothing good would come from Mr. Sawyer and me as the manager continuing to clash. Moreover, the rumors about the newcomer from a prestigious university being truly competent had reached me. If such an outstanding person was coming to support the sales department, I decided to leave the company with my regrets in check. Upon leaving the company, I immediately called my father. "Hello, Dad. I got fired from the company." "Oh, is that so? You've worked hard until now." Since Mr. Sawyer's arrival, I had been telling my father that I might quit my job. When I called to tell him, surprisingly, my father immediately told me to come to his company. So, right after resigning, I headed to the company run by my father. When I say my father's company, it's actually now my brother who has taken over as president, and my father has stepped down to the chairman position. Initially, after my graduation, I was suggested to work in sales at my father's company, but wanting to experience the rough waves of society first, I chose to work at a local company for some social experience. My father, who had listened to my whims, offered to re-employ me at his company. In fact, I had been approached a little while ago about joining my father's company. Though I had always talked about work with enthusiasm, my expression had darkened, and I had become reticent in the past few months, which my father had completely seen through. "Hey, something must have changed at your workplace recently." "How did you know?" "I can tell just by looking at you. You used to go to your job as if you were kicking up the company, but now you don't talk about it at all." "Was it that obvious?" "Actually, the new manager who arrived is an unbelievable person." While glossing over the specifics of the work, I shared what Mr. Sawyer had said, and my father was even angrier than I was. "You should quit a company like that any time. Our company always has a place for you." "It's not that simple. I have subordinates who look up to me, but I appreciate the offer. Could you give me some time to think about it?" Having had that conversation before, it's probably why my father immediately said he would re-employ me. In the end, the same day I left the company, I went to my family's company and was immediately placed in sales. Just as my father had said, my brother offered me a managerial position, but I felt it was too much to ask for. I'm a newcomer to this company, so I'll join as a regular employee. In fact, my father's company is a major precision equipment manufacturer. That is, it was a major client of the company where I used to work as a salesperson who used to work for a parts factory that was a supplier. I vowed to work for my father's company, making the most of my knowledge. I thought about how I could repay my father and brother for everything they had done for me. The next day, I immediately went on a round of greetings to suppliers and clients with my new boss, Ryan. Among them was, of course, the company I had worked for until the day before. Knowing the situation, Ryan offered to skip it considering my feelings, but I insisted it was fine and headed straight to my former company. As expected, my subordinates were quite surprised to see me as a new contact person from the client side. A subordinate who was close to me misunderstood and tearfully said, "Brian, you've come back. That's great." However, all I could respond was, "Sorry, but from today, I'm an employee of the client company." This subordinate was disappointed, hoping I would come back. But then Mr. Sawyer appeared. Mr. Sawyer, with his usual unpleasant look, glanced at me, and without even checking the name of the company I had re-employed at, he disparaged, "A bottom feeder like you could only get a job at some low-level company." Really, what kind of person is he? As I was pondering this, a man approached Mr. Sawyer. Such disrespect towards a client is questionable. It's fine. This guy is, James, the incompetent bottom feeder I fired yesterday." Mr. Sawyer replied. The man, referred to as James, looked worriedly at Mr. Sawyer, frowning. "I think that's irrelevant now. Whatever his status was until yesterday, he's here as a client today." "Maybe so, but we don't need to deal with a company that employs such incompetence." "Send him away quickly," Mr. Sawyer insisted. It seemed that James was the new manager who had taken over my position, the elite from the prestigious university that Mr. Sawyer had mentioned. Unlike Mr. Sawyer, this person appeared polite and certainly intelligent. Hearing this exchange, I felt relieved, but Ryan, appalled, spoke up. "We came here today to introduce Brian, the new Kodak person." "But isn't this disrespectful?" "I know him, so no need for introductions. Besides, we won't be dealing with your company." "In that case, shall we consider our business dealings with your company terminated?" "I don't want to associate with a company that hires incompetence," Mr. Sawyer stated coldly. After stating this, Mr. Sawyer waved me off rudely. "Come on. Get out. I have no intention of dealing with someone like you." "Are you sure about terminating our dealings?" I asked. "Can't you hear? Incompetents are useless all around. Get out quickly, or I'll call security." With that, there was nothing more to do. Ryan and I returned and reported the incident to my brother, the president, and my father, the chairman. My father, with a troubled expression, said, "We've had a long relationship with that company, but maybe it's time to end it," and started writing something. The rest of the story was relayed to me later by a subordinate I was close to. A few days later, President Watson personally summoned Mr. Sawyer. "Mr. Sawyer, you've done something unthinkable." I have no idea what you're talking about, Mr. Sawyer replied, looking troubled. You turned away a neurotic person who came to greet us the other day, didn't you? Oh yes, that guy. But there's no need to worry about it. That person had just left the company and was truly incompetent at his job. I didn't ask for that. Turning away a neurotic person is not the way to treat a client. But it's fine not to deal with a company that employs such a person, Mr. Sawyer retorted nonchalantly. However, President Watson, with a stern expression, presented a letter. Did you check which company Brian came from? He's from our largest client, a major precision equipment manufacturer. Upon hearing this, Mr. Sawyer turned pale and began to tremble. No, that can't be. Brian is competent. He got rehired by such a renowned company. That can't be. That's not possible. Mr. Sawyer, trembling, started reading the letter President Watson was holding. As he understood the content, his face turned pale, and he began to shake. The letter stated that there would be a permanent halt in dealings with the major client, and Mr. Sawyer was the reason for it. Why? I didn't do anything. Read it carefully. It's written that you turned away Brian and unilaterally declared a halt in dealings from your side. What? Of course, my father was the one who sent that document, and I was the one who provided the information. Deals with my father's company accounted for 30% of my former company's total dealings. Therefore, not being able to deal with us would be a significant loss. Based on this, I had James conduct interviews with the subordinates. It seems you've been giving unreasonable orders and verbal abuse for some time. No, I never. Maybe I got a bit too passionate in my guidance and went too far. I've heard that it was because of this that Brian was forced to leave, President Watson said, glaring at Mr. Sawyer. Desperately making excuses, Mr. Sawyer stammered, "That's not true. That incompetent Brian is trying to set me up. It's not just Brian. Other subordinates have also reported verbal abuse and terrible behavior from you." President Watson presented evidence, causing Mr. Sawyer to collapse to his knees. Watching Mr. Sawyer, President Watson declared calmly, "Mr. Sawyer, as of today, you will relinquish your position as department head." Upon hearing this, Mr. Sawyer covered his face with both hands and started shaking, crying. Later, President Watson visited my father's company to ask if they would consider resuming business with them. I apologize for the great rudeness and inconvenience caused by Mr. Sawyer. I will take responsibility for his guidance. If his behavior does not improve, we will consider taking disciplinary action. It's a presumptuous request, but could we possibly resume our business dealings? I had no grudge against President Watson. On the contrary, I was grateful for the employment until recently. After discussing with my father, we decided to resume the business dealings. Hearing this, President Watson grasped my hand and expressed his gratitude. Half a year later, a former subordinate invited me for a meal and shared what happened afterward. Brian, it was quite a mess after that. The subordinate seemed eager to tell me. Following the incident, Mr. Sawyer's erratic guidance and abusive behavior came to light, but the company's regulations did not lead to his dismissal. Instead, Mr. Sawyer was demoted to a regular employee, and his salary was significantly reduced. He was given a completely different job, spending all day organizing files in the storeroom. I thought this was lenient enough, but it seems Mr. Sawyer couldn't accept any punishment. Angry about having to do boring work alone in a room after previously commanding many subordinates, he resigned on his own. However, after learning about the circumstances of his resignation, his wife, dismayed by his selfish behavior, left him, and they divorced. He had a son, but the son also left with his mother, leaving Mr. Sawyer all alone. After sharing this, the subordinate's face brightened. With Mr. Sawyer gone and James joining us, working in sales has become much easier. James, my successor, became the manager after Mr. Sawyer's resignation. He even came to the drinking party today and greeted me, saying, "Thanks to you organizing the team so well, I've been able to manage somehow, even though I'm new to this position. I truly appreciate it." Not at all. I had heard rumors about your competence before. I'm really grateful to you. It seems James wanted to express his gratitude to me directly. Despite the fact that both Mr. Sawyer and James are elites, James stands out for being both compassionate and competent. It truly made me happy that he assessed my work rather than making assumptions about me based on my university. That was the instant I knew all of my efforts had been worthwhile. James and I became friends after we had dinner and talked. James, who was ready to give his all at work, asked me a number of questions after receiving a surprise promotion to sales manager. I was quite delighted to see James's commitment. The sales department became more positive once Mr. Sawyer left, and sales output increased dramatically. I was reminded by this experience of how much leadership and the environment of the workplace affect productivity. I felt inspired to put in a lot of effort in my new job. Afterwards, I found out that President Watson had not intended for Mr. Sawyer to step down. In fact, plans were in place for Mr. Sawyer to go back to his previous job if he had expressed regret and worked hard for roughly 3 months. "There's no such thing as a boring job," he said, hoping that he would revert to his earlier level of sincerity. Sadly, it appears Mr. Sawyer missed the fact that this was President Watson's last act of compassion. Mr. Sawyer left the company without appreciating his work and without knowing President Watson's goals. Mr. Sawyer tried to get a new job, but it was hard for him to get employed because of his age. It appears he was unable to put up with being treated like a novice, even when he managed to find another place to work. He was fired for having a poor attitude and being haughty towards supervisors who were younger than him. He carried on changing jobs, and he is currently making ends meet with regular employment. I've been using my prior experiences ever then in my new sales career. I've learned from this experience, so in addition to concentrating on raising my own game, I'm also trying to improve the department's general atmosphere. I work very hard to train the juniors, and as a result, my coworkers and subordinates in the new company think highly of me. James really helped me realize this, and for that, I am really grateful. In addition to continuing to value the experiences I received from my former employer and clients, my goal is to help my family's business expand. I'm resolved to put in a lot of effort to earn back my father's and brother's patience and trust.